Hello and welcome to the newest tutorial. I am going to be naming this Circle Fight. It is essentially a top-down shooter quick start tutorial that will help you learn basic GML. Your Gamemaker might look a little different than mine. That's okay. Just click New Project and click New Blank. I'm going to call this Circle Fight. And let's go. If it gives you any option between GML visual or GML or Gamemaker code or visual, make sure to use the code because that's what I'm teaching. As I stated, this is a tutorial for learning the Gamemaker language, and it is very basic, it is very beginner friendly, and we're going to just be as easy as possible on all the beginners. So with Gamemaker, the first thing you want to do is create images that are going to be in your game. Every game has an image of the main character, enemies, whatever, walls, whatever you want. You need images to represent things in your game. In Gamemaker, those are called sprites. So you can click this plus button up here and click sprites and click create, or you can double click sprites. And for some reason, I wish it would just automatically move it into the correct folder. I'm going to do that manually. But it opens up this window here. And this is your sprite window. You can change the size. Right now it is 32 by 32. Yours might be 64 by 64. If you need to change it, you can edit these numbers right here to say 32, 32. Then you click apply, and it should look exactly like mine does. So like I said, we're just going to be very beginner friendly. I'm going to click Edit Image. I'm just going to click a green color and use the circle tool to create a circle. And this will be our player. Everything you do in this window is automatically saved. So you can just go up here and click the X button. And we're going to name it something appropriate like S, which stands for Sprite, player. Another thing we want to do while we're here is open the collision mask. Let's say you're just next to an enemy. If an enemy touches right here, at the moment, our collision masks is saying that counts as a collision with our player. But this is empty space, and we shouldn't be taking damage if we are not touching the enemy. So we need to change the parameters of the collision mask. So all we do here is we open this here and we click from rectangle to ellipse. And that's all you need to do for right now. There are plenty of more in-depth things you can do, but as I said, this is a quick start and we're just trying to get a basic prototype of a game as fast as possible and as simple as possible so that you can get started in making games. Now, we have our first image. The next thing we're going to need to do is give this image behavior. For example, if you press WASD or the arrow keys, we want to be able to move the player. That's what we're going to do next. So let's exit out of this. If there is anything in your game that has a behavior that you need to program, such as button controls or enemy AI and such, you are going to want to create that in an object. So like I told you, you can click plus here, but I'm going to click create, right click object, click create, and hit object. And that automatically puts it into my folder of objects here. So this is what shows up when you're creating a new object. Let's go ahead and change the name to something appropriate. O player. Likewise, S stands for sprite. O stands for object. And which sprite is it that we are going to create this code for? We are going to be using the player. So now we have an object and we have the opportunity to add code to it. First, what I'm going to show you here is the level editor. We're going to put our player into the game. By default, Gamemaker should have one room called room 1. Go ahead and double click that and it opens up a lot of stuff. Don't worry, we're going to learn a lot about this stuff later on. For right now, the only thing we really want to do is drag our player into the game, or our room. This is essentially room 1. You could also think of this as level 1. That's all we want to do with our level right now. Let's exit out of this up here. And let's continue on creating our player and making him be able to move with the button presses of WASD. That's what I'm going to do. You could change these to the arrow keys. We'll get into that. All right, so the first thing we want to do here is click Add Event. And there are plenty of different things that kind of act as triggers for things in your game to activate certain behaviors and such. The one we want to work with is step. And there are 3 different kinds of step: the standard, begin, and end. Let's just click step, step. Now step is essentially a code that repeats every single frame of your game. Every single second that your game is running, this code will also be running. You can delete everything here. And then if you write something after the @ description, let's just say game update. You can put this whatever you want, and it also reflects over here. So that way, if you're looking for a certain code and you have a bunch of events, it can be easier to organize your events here if you have a little description. So that's nice. All right, the first thing we want to do is we're going to create our first line of code. And our first line of code is going to be if keyboard check, if keyboard check. That is going to be our first line of code. You do an open parentheses and close parentheses after it. So if, that's pretty self-explanatory. If keyboard check. Keyboard check is means you are pressing a button. If you are pressing a button, and you can see here it says which key are you trying to, it's trying to ask you which key you're specifying. If keyboard check key, and I'm going to write this down and I'll explain it after in a second. Ord, open parentheses, quotation, capital W, quotation, close parentheses. So you can see if keyboard check W. And this ORD is just kind of a special code that gets that checks specifically for this W. It's just kind of the way that keyboards work. And yeah, that's just the way it works. So after that, you press enter and curly bracket open and closed curly bracket. And now we have, if the W button is pressed, we have execute this. It will execute this code, this commands in this in these brackets. Sorry, I can't talk. So right now we are technically saying if you're pressing W, do nothing. And we want to change that, obviously. So I'm going to show you this here back in our room. If you think of the room kind of as a graph, every object in your level has an X and Y coordinate. You can see down here, it shows my mouse here. If I move to the right, the X coordinate, 107, gets higher, 165, 282. So moving to the right is a positive X value. Moving to the left, likewise, decreases it. And every object also has this X and Y value. So you can see if I move up, 385, 360, 325, 288. Going up is a negative Y value, and likewise going down is a positive Y value. 297, 370, 445, 500, etc. So I want you to keep that in mind here. Every object has an X and Y value, which represents their position in the level. So with that in mind, what happens when we press W? We want to affect the Y coordinate. So we're just going to say Y equals y minus 5. And that's all we're going to put. Y equals y minus 5. You want to have it specifically relative to where you are now. If you just had y equals minus 5, you'll see what happens. He goes to the -5 position because that's the -5 position in the level. But we want to simply subtract 5 from his current position. So y equals y minus 5. And you'll see that you'll very quickly and easily see the difference here. He moves at a speed of 5 pixels per frame. And then you might have an idea as to what we're going to do next. We're going to code in the rest of the buttons. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. Let's do that better. Control C, 1, 2, 3. For a total of 4 letters, our W, A, S, and D. And we're going to edit these here. W, you want to make sure they're capitalized. S, D. Okay, so for W, we're moving up 5, which is a Y minus. For A, we're moving left, which will be actually affecting the X coordinate. X is what you want to affect if you're moving left or right, and it is correct if you're moving left, you will be moving in a negative value direction. So S should be moving down, which is a positive Y value. And if you're moving to the right, you want to be affecting the X, and that will be a positive value. So with just about 16 lines of code minus these two that don't really count, we should have our basic movement. W, A, S, D. And if you've coded it correctly, you also will see if you press W and D at the same time, or A and S, up and right, down and left, you can also move diagonally, which is really nice. That's a big core aspect of any game is movement. And to be able to have that down within about 20 lines of code or less, that is really great. So that's movement. Next, we're going to be looking into probably shooting bullets, maybe looking into wall collisions, creating walls, so that way you don't run out of the room. You can kind of run out of the room, and we'll fix that later on. But for right now, we just have movement, and that's the video. If you got any suggestions for what we can add in this game, please feel free to comment that down below. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you in part 2. Thank you for watching.